What's going on, guys? Happy Friday, happy Friday, happy Coffee Buzz Friday. Hope you have your coffee. I'm drinking water because I just worked out. I'm going fresh into a workout, right into a coffee buzz, a little bit more energy in there. And it'll be good, right? Because we're going to do coffee buzz, so it's questions. So I'll do 3 questions today, which is somewhat philosophical and in the philosophical realm of thought, thinking, subjective. I just did an objective lift, right? So how do you come down from more of a physical movement thing into the body? And I would imagine mind is also a part of, it has to be. I wonder, do you guys think, here's a question to start the coffee buzz. Do you guys think that your mind gives out before your body or your body gives out before your mind? That's always been a popular topic in the sports world, especially I feel like when I was in college. In college, the training was so much harder in college. You were just it was like sort of the law, right? You just would train so hard and it'd be difficult. And then pro ball was the exact opposite. It was always to not get hurt. It was risk adverse, as I would say. But in college, you could definitely get hurt training. And we were just so young, we could handle some of those things. But, I remember our strength coach used to always tell us the mind would go before the body. So I'm curious what you guys think about that. Anyways, I don't have time to really think about that because I'm about to be on the clock for answering these questions. Welcome back to Coffee Buzz, and let's get into this. So, wow, some good ones. So the first question is, why does suffering happen? Why does suffering happen? Why does suffering happen? So when I hear the word happen in that, I think of it as a happening, like it's happening to us, it's happening for us, it's happening against us. And when I hear the word happen, why does suffering happen? Well, I think it's twofold, right? Because in one side of suffering happening, I think it's an inevitable. I think that life is suffering. So I would rely with somewhat of Buddha's work in that. And a lot of my understanding of suffering is that I wrote about this in my last book, we formed suffering through material suffering, which is more of an ego suffering. You suffer more through ego. And then there's a spiritual suffering, which means you suffer more through spirit, obviously, more through your soul, your essence. And in a religious background or a faithful background or a higher power, if you believe in that, if you're into that, the concept of having a higher power would create more of a spiritual suffering aspect in life. And so in answering the question, why does suffering happen in terms of what I just said? Well, we need suffering, therefore, to experience being human. And that's one of the initial things, right, in Genesis when we were given the sins from God. One of the things that, like, for instance, women had to bear children, that was going to be a suffering, a part of sin. But the interesting thing about having a child in life is that, at least, I will never experience this as a man, but from hearing people like my wife or women speaking about childbirth, they talk, I'm just talking about how I've heard it, but they talk about it as such a transcending experience that only they get to experience or that they get to have. And I know firsthand from being a part of a childbirth, just seeing the suffering that goes into that process, but then the bliss and the enlightenment of love, we'll say, I'll put those words together. You put the magnitude of love into a mother and a child. It's interesting how suffering must happen in order for that love to exist. And so I think that that's what answers part of the question, why does suffering happen? I think it happens because it's needed to happen to allow us to get more out of this experience. So we need to suffer. When I go back to how I categorize suffering, suffering in the material sense through the ego is just wrapped around so much anxiety and worry and guilt and shame, regret, those sort of things. And it's okay. It's a part of life as well. We have an ego. We experience life with an ego. So I think that the material side of suffering is not something that has to happen to us. I think that we bring that to ourselves instead of getting after life or letting life be. We try to force life. We try to make life happen instead of just exist in it and experience it and experience the suffering. We try to be the rulers. And I think that when we're trapped in our ego, in that sense, we're just going to be trapped by a suffering that's different than spiritual suffering. So we're going to more exist, like I said, in things like guilt of the past or anxieties and worries of the future. And I think that that's the physical mind body vehicle that we have, that we play with. That's part of the thing, right? If you're a woman that's going to that's going to do childbirth, you are going to experience something, and your mind is going to have tons of anxieties and worries and concerns and all these things. But then outside of all of that, the spiritual suffering, the mattering of that is that it becomes a transcending experience. And so you needed that level of suffering to reach a deeper capacity for love. And I think that that's why suffering happens to us. And obviously, if you're into any of this obviously Buddhism is more of an atheist approach, but just think of the law of suffering. Buddha, I think, especially the four principles that he came up with, but I think a lot of Buddha's work is beautiful to study just in general, depending on what your religious beliefs are. Just in general, I think it's a pretty beautiful lane to go down if you're into more of understanding that question. It sounds like a lot of these questions, I kind of go back and forth on these, and I have Rhett Hebig, who actually got involved with Steve and I, that'll be coming out. He'll ask us more questions in person, but I'm kind of hammering through these philosophical questions that I kind of bucket. A lot of times when I know I've got a lot of philosophical questions, or I kind of bucket them, so I'm kind of having a philosophical day, if you will. But so that was a great question. Why does suffering happen? The next question on that is, should we try to prevent bad events from happening? If so, then how would we go about doing that? So should we try to prevent bad events from happening? If so, then how should we go about doing that? I've always thought, it's ironic that I talked about college in the beginning of this, because I've always thought that it was interesting to me that from what I've experienced, most of life's adversities came at college when you leave your parents, right? It's like the first stage of maturation in your life. And so you evolve out of being raised or having people who are responsible for you, and you kind of are on off on your own. It doesn't have to be like this, and I'm sure other people have different scenarios. I just was in the sports route, and I went to college. And so when you're in college, first of all, especially where I was at, I was a Division I athlete. And when you go to Division I sports, everybody was the best player in their high school. It only gets better as you go up in the pro ranks. But for the most part, obviously, everybody was already that talented. They were already a Division I player. So when I went there, all of a sudden I was no longer just naturally gifted and better than everybody in high school. So that in and of itself was difficult. I'm not going to say it was bad, obviously, but it was adversity. And then you're not with your parents, or you're with people who are responsible for you, so you slip a lot, right? And you're just responsible for everything on your own. It's weird how I would just sleep in and miss class all the time in college and just not really think anything of that, which is so odd. But I just had never been responsible for myself. And then the maturity phase is that obviously you mature out of that. And by my senior year of college, I was clearly not acting like that. And when I got into pro sports and then started a business and a career, it definitely was none of those things. But I've always asked myself and others the question, you want those adversities to happen to you. And a lot of times they happen when you're in that early 20s of your life, but you don't want them to happen to you because they come off as so bad. Like the events are so bad. I had a big elbow surgery that changed my life when I was 19, and it was such a bad event. But the irony of the event being so bad is that to this day has been one of my checkpoints of my most meaningful moments of my life. It's almost like I needed such a bad situation to happen in order to grow. So my initial answer to that is, should we try to prevent bad things from happening? My answer to that is no. Unless it's coming from the original first question, from the ego. Meaning, if I know based off free will or decision making, ego driven, things that are ill willed, there's a karmic energy I think that does exist. And so I think in that sense, we should try to live a disciplined, obedient path towards doing the good, living a good life, preventing bad things from happening. And I think that that's not more of a universal world changing view. I think that's more of an individual, just your own life. Just kind of keep track of what you have going on around you individually and stay obedient to a process that is more so on the side of good over bad, right? But in order to have good, you have to have bad. It's one of those things, if you believe in God, you have to believe in an evil, because there can't be there can't be a positive God without a negative, right? So you have to have both of them. Without one or the other, they don't exist. So it's thinking in this sense, like in order to have more good in your life, you have to be challenged by the potential bad that also exists in your life. And so I think in more of just a day-to-day morality code, more like a moral law, I think that you should aim to prevent bad and aim more towards an obedience to the good of morality. And that's also somewhat subjective, but I'm just going to stay there for the initial thought of this question. But as far as the overarching adversity that occurs in life and whether or not you should try to prevent bad, I don't think you should. I think that you should allow yourself to experience life and allow life to unfold itself and be a part of it, right? So it's like a lot of my elbow injury, I think, that occurred was because of how much baseball I probably played. I wasn't as diligent in my life beforehand. Could I have prevented that and not had the bad event happen? I think so, but I didn't have the awareness at the time without the bad event. So my awareness grew. And that's where like things like now today, preparation matters to me a lot more so that I can avoid injury. But I don't get to the importance of preparation without the bad event. And I don't think I'm unique to that situation. I think that that's very familiar to most people's lives. So in the way in which trying to avoid adversity or bad in that scenario, I think that we shouldn't try to prevent it. I think that we should just accept that as a part of life. Death is a part of life. Breakups are a part of life. Changing careers is a part of life. Failure is a part of life. And I think that that's managing and understanding and allowing the acceptance of duality. As for morality, I think that we should try to prevent bad, right? Now, what was the second part of that question? Where are you? If so, then how would we go about doing that? I guess I kind of answered that. So yeah, that would be my answer. I think that that's the moral compass, decision making, leaning more side on the thing that reality has deemed as good, right? So we consider, let's use one that just popped into my head, but we consider opening the door for somebody as a polite gesture. It's a morally good thing to do to service somebody else selflessly. And I don't think it's bad necessarily if you forget to do that or you don't do that or you're just like moving through life and you just do it. But I think to aim for a more awareness to moral gestures that are serving the greater good, I just think naturally that habitually hardwires itself into you to have that as a routine part of your psyche. And eventually I think that stuff comes out unconsciously and you just sort of become this polite gestured on the side of moral good. I think that happens naturally. And so I would say definitely to aim to do those things to just prevent the bad. Now that's just a metaphorical story for thousands of examples, but that was the first one that popped into my head. Then the second side of that is I don't think you should try to prevent adverse things that will happen in your life. And I'm going to categorize that as failure or pains or injuries or, lessons, forms of lessons in the form of failure. So that's my answer to that one. Ooh, this is a good one. I mean, both of these are good, but both these are good. So both of the questions that I'm looking at right now one is why does it matter if we are alive? And then the second one, do humans need other people in order to live? Which one am I going to answer? Is really what it comes down to. Why does it matter if we're alive? I think I'm going to go with that one. I'm going to answer the second one really quick. Sorry, I got a little sniffle there. Just because do humans need other people in order to live? I mean, historically, we lived in tribes, right? And that was like the big thing. We've always been tribal, communal type people. So in essence, yes, we need other humans to live. I think if you scale that out to massive hierarchies in the governments, it's like, do we actually need governments to live? Do we need protection from other people to survive? Or is it truly a survival of the fittest, right? I mean, I don't know anybody because I wouldn't know them that lives entirely alone by themselves. According to YouTubes and some documentaries, it seems to be that there have been a few people in life that have done that. The first thing that comes to my mind is that fella in Into the Wild. I think he died when he was 32, but he wanted to escape the matrix of society. He wanted to break free and go live in Alaska. You can watch that movie. It's called Into the Wild. And the irony is, like, yes, he did it. He wrote some beautiful stuff, and it's a cool movie. It's kind of sad, but it's also beautiful. I love it. I've loved it a lot and enjoyed it. I've seen it a few times. Not anything recently, but at the end, I'm pretty confident he dies out of starvation. So what's the point, right? And that's where I'm going to use that to answer the first question I wanted to answer. But that's what becomes really interesting about that story, right? Because he did all the things that he was trying to do. He was trying to break free of the fabric of society. However, he died through starvation. If he has other people with him and the money that his family had and the security that his community had, I would imagine he obviously could have died some other way, but does he die through starvation on his own in Alaska? I would imagine not. So in that sense, is it possible to live without other humans? I don't know many success stories in what we would consider surviving, a living, right? I'm going to answer both now. I lied to you guys. I'm answering 4 questions. But I really liked this question. So, why does it matter if we're alive? I'll end here. Let's talk about this one and we'll let it rip. Why does it matter that we are alive? I don't think it matters. That's the irony. I don't think any of this thing exists, though, unless we are alive. That's kind of the question. Does this exist without consciousness? Does it need consciousness to be a thing? Is social media, our jobs, is anything, is nature real without consciousness? If humans weren't alive, does this thing exist? And then how would we be able to even make that an answer? How would we be able to answer that if that's accurate or not? Because it would be subjective. If we said all the humans on the planet were non-existent, but the planet existed, that has to remain a subjective truth. There's no way, I don't think we can make that objective. And so therefore, that's why I think I like that question. I don't know if I would like my answer because I don't know if I have an answer to it. I don't think you're supposed to, really. But why does it matter if we're alive? I think that it matters that we're alive because of what I just said. Because the other part of realizing I don't think anything exists without consciousness, meaning that we don't create anything without an idea. And therefore, ideas matter because we are alive. And so being alive and bringing our ideas, our ideology to the cosmic whole matters. And it matters because in order for ideas to mean anything, there has to be a mystery in which we're here to experience. And so I think that experiencing the mystery becomes the mattering in our lifespan. And I often ask this question about what is survival or where is there. Alan Watts, one of my favorite philosophers, would ask that. I believe that came from Alan Watts. And he would always ask, well, where is there? What is progress? And I like that question as well, because what are we progressing to? We're only progressing to a mystery. But then in which case we are a mystery, experiencing a mystery. And something about experiencing the mystery in order to get the full exposure to the limitlessness of that, there we would have to matter. And so I do think that we matter so that we can play out all these ideas as a form of entertainment for consciousness. And that's why we all do certain things and create moral laws and try to prevent bad, experience bad, support each other, have communities, have tragedies, save each other, heal each other, hurt each other, kill each other, etc., etc. We do all the things. We do the entire experience. But in order for our idea to matter, we have to do all the things. And I think that's why it matters that we're alive. Because if we weren't alive, I don't think it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter. Because the ideas would be extinct. There would be no idea without consciousness. So our ability to have consciousness and develop ideas and experience idea, we make that matter in order to experience the mystery of life. And the mystery to us is what we deem as matterful. Is matterful a word? Who knows? Great questions. Always love Fridays, Coffee Buzz Fridays especially. It's starting to heat up. The trees have been budding. in Minnesota, it's like every day I see more green on the trees, and that appeals to me. Much love to everybody. Happy Friday. Enjoy your lives because you matter. Why? I don't know. There's a mystery to that, but you do. Goodbye.